Hey guys, Ben Labadie here, and again I'm with Art Sterling. And Art, good to have you back one more time.
No, thanks for inviting me back.
So what we're going to do today is, again, just like anything before with the other candidates, is just have a friendly conversation. This is also an opportunity for you to get to know the candidates more, ask the candidates questions, and so Art is running for Ward 2. Now,
Correct.
you've already been on council before.
Yes.
In Ward 2. So can you just give people an idea what Ward 2 is, where Ward 2 is?
Okay. Ward 2 is essentially the Thames River, south to Lake Erie, from Merlin Side Road to Kent Bridge Road. And it's the former townships of Harwich and Raleigh and the town of Blenheim, the former town of Blenheim, and villages of Erio and Erie Beach. One of the quirkiness of the ward boundaries is that it goes to Indian Creek Road within the community of Chatham. So anybody south of Indian Creek Road is actually in Ward
So that's
2.
literally split down the middle.
It literally split right down the middle of Indian Creek Road. I know that there are a lot of people that live out on Charing Cross Road or Queen Street Extension or whatever you might call it, and all of the various subdivisions off of there, that sometimes believe that they're voting for Ward 6.
Right.
Then they get to the polls and they realize that they don't really know these things. It's kind of a quirk of the geography. But it is the old city of Chatham boundary was also Indian Creek Road, and they maintained that boundary when they created the new wards.
Okay, so you guys are home of the Bayside beer. So you guys got good beer out there, right?
We got Bayside Brewery in Erio. We've got a lot of great little tourist type businesses in Erio and right across along by the lake.
Now you guys just had, I believe, Art in the Park.
Art in the Boulevard.
Art in the Boulevard.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, where they kind of do a lot
Yes.
of art down there, and that was pretty popular.
It's very popular. It's tremendously successful. I drove down there. Like, you cannot find a parking spot. It sometimes takes you a half an hour or better to just get into the heart of Erio from when you're coming down Erio Road. But each year they've got tremendous vendors there with their wares, and a lot of excitement in the village that day. There's usually music at the local establishments, and there's some fundraising that goes on at places like the Erio Yacht Club or the Anglican Church. So there's always a lot of activity that day, and it's always Civic Holiday Weekend, and it's great because that's also the same weekend that every year they have the free beach bus
Okay.
pass down, and so Erio actually does get a lot of people come from the community of Chatham and elsewhere for that event.
Awesome. Okay, so let's talk about how your campaign's going. Last time we talked, you weren't running for anything. We were just talking politics and having
Right.
fun. But now you're involved. What are you hearing out there? Have you got deep into the campaign yet? And what are the challenges that the people in Ward 2 are facing?
I'm moving into the campaign. I'm still working on getting some of my materials put together. Should have my signs here very shortly. It's the middle of summer.
Yep.
It is a little bit of a difficult time to reach out to people. People are kind of distracted by summertime activities and are a little less engaged in the current affairs of the
Yep.
world or of the municipality. But I've always found that the people in South Canada are very welcoming and interested in hearing your perspectives, your views, what you might be able to do to help them, and what we can do together to help move the whole community forward. So it's I'm hearing that one of the things that people are liking, those that are paying close attention, is the simple fact of the number of people running, particularly in the wards. There seems to be a lot of fresh new faces, a lot of energy, and some younger people running, and I think that's very good for the municipality. That's very good for democracy, and I think that I'm looking forward to the debates later on, and right across all the wards. I think there's going to be some new perspectives, some new ideas, There's always going to be a few that aren't workable, no matter how much you might want to make it happen. It's either, against the Municipal Act, or it's something that you just can't get enough support around council to do.
Right.
But I am heartened by the enthusiasm and the energy and the number of people that put their names forward.
Yeah. So how many people are running in your ward, and how many people get selected? Is it 2 or is it 3?
It's 3 outside of the Ward 6 Chatham. It's the only municipality, or the only ward rather, that has more than 2 councillors.
Okay.
The population size justifies that in South Kent. And so we have 3 councillors in the south, and it's always been a competitive race. Right. This time around, there's 8 people running, and I'm looking forward to getting to know some of them. I don't know some of them very well, if at all. Mm-hmm. And it's a nice mix. There's a couple of incumbents running. Myself, I have 8 years experience, but I haven't been there the last 4 years. As you know, I was busy working on the animal shelter project. Yep. And then there's a couple of 3 people that haven't been all that visible in the community, but I'm very fascinated to hear what ideas they might bring to the table.
Awesome. Hey, Steve, how you doing? Don't be scared to hit the like button. Ask questions. If you have opinions, share them. That's what we're here for. Tina Prini Sufi says, "Hey, Art, my dad and I are watching, and you are providing excellent service, Ben." So that was a hand clap for me. Thank you.
Say hi to your dad for me.
So I can't do this, Tina, without people showing up and actually putting themselves in the hot seat like Art has right now, and facing a live, question and answer with anybody that's really out there. So it's kind of, I gotta assume, I know it's always a little bit scary for me to do these. It's gotta be scarier for you guys to pull up and not be sure what's happening here. So moving on, we had Allison's story. She's a candidate for mayor. She was on yesterday, and anytime we get to the election, we get this whole thing of the people on the outside of Ward 6 not feeling that they ever have a voice. And now This is now 20 years now, okay?
Right. Yep.
Now you are outside of Ward 6. What are you hearing? Is it the same thing over and over?
There's always that rural-urban divide, whether it's real or perceived. Sometimes it doesn't matter. Perception is reality, I guess. We've had that from the beginning of amalgamation. I've always found it somewhat fascinating, because if you just do a sheer count of the number of councillors around the horseshoe that represent the outside communities, the rural wards, it far outnumbers the 6 that are sitting there from the community of Chatham. So, I've often wondered about the logic of the argument that we don't have a voice at council.
11-1.
And I know sometimes it stems from decisions on infrastructure projects that, that they for very logical reasons end up being located in Chatham, because Chatham is the hub of the community, and it's the center point on the wheel, and it has the larger population, and it makes sense to, if you're going to put something for the community, it makes sense to put it in the community of Chatham. But I am sensitive to the concerns. I know that. I've heard plenty of people express that point of view. I've seen it in action sometimes. I've seen it in some of the decisions we made in the past on road repairs and bridge repairs and drainage issues. And I know that there are sometimes the sense that people in the rural areas are not getting their fair share of the investment into infrastructure. I really am, again, heartened by the number of candidates coming from all the various rural parts of Chatham-Kent, but also the activity of a number of community groups. There's the Bothwell Boosters, the Uriel Partnership Association, Wheatley has a group. There are these community groups all over the various smaller communities now in Chatham-Kent, and they have provided a fabulous service, a fantastic service, because they hold meetings. It allows the ward councillors to attend and address concerns and answer questions. and they also provide a great mechanism for collecting communities' input and thoughts on things.
Right.
And so, since those groups have gotten active and have gotten more and more popular, I think decision making is much more informed now as it relates to some of those smaller communities.
Makes things go a little bit quicker having that information already there too as well.
Yeah.
So, so you haven't been on council for the last 4 years, but you have been incredibly active as usual in the community. So it's almost like, even though you weren't on council, you're still, people assume that, hey, you're involved in everything and that. Where is the animal shelter at? Because that was one of the big projects that you've been working on. You just put the shovels in the ground, last month?
Last month, yeah.
Right, and what's the timeline on that thing?
I honestly thought that Agri-Urban would have probably been on site doing some work already by now. I know that it's imminent. The last time I drove past, there wasn't any activity yet, but it is still on track to be built and closed in by the winter months, giving the winter time to finish it on the inside, and the hope is that it'll be open and operational by about next March or April. So it was a fun project to work on. It was a challenging project to work on. The community was tremendously supportive. I enjoyed, along with Marjorie, leading that campaign and that project, and getting it to the point now where it's going to be a reality. We're still doing some fundraising work. We still have to raise a few dollars for furniture and fixtures and equipment, cages and weight scales and those kinds of things. And so we're still out there raising money for these specific pieces of equipment. But the big piece is done. We've got the capital, enough capital for the build, and it's going to move forward. It's been something that the community's wanted for a very long time, and again, it kept me connected to the municipality and connected to the community these last 4 years, because it is ultimately a municipal building. So we had to work closely with municipal staff to get to be able to do what we did, and so it's kept me connected. It's kept me informed. I pay very close attention to what's going on at council when they have their meetings, and listen to a lot of the feedback. Certainly, people know that I'm on social media, so I see a lot of feedback on social media.
We argue a lot on social media.
Yeah, we have our fun times.
Yeah, and you know what? Being on social media really helps engage many of the people out there, especially when it comes to the voting. So this year you're going to have online voting, and that's going to be a big deal. What do you know? What the age range of Ward 2 is? Do you know how many seniors versus youth?
Yeah. I don't know it off the top of my head.
I was thinking that as I was asking you, there's no way you're going to know that.
Yes, these are the Stats Canada demographics. No, yeah, we have that information.
Yeah.
This isn't the first time for online voting. We did it 4 years ago. It was kind of a pilot project. They're rolling it out more aggressively this time around, but it's not the first time for online voting. It's catching on in a lot of communities. A lot of municipal elections now have an online component. It certainly helps for those that may be traveling, or students that are away to university or college or whatever. That are still registered voters in Chatham-Kent. So it certainly is another means. I really don't have a preference one way or the other. I've always voted in every election. And I've always felt a sense of duty to vote, and it's never been an inconvenience for me to get to a polling station. But I know for a lot of people who are maybe mobility challenged, or senior shut-ins, that kind of thing, if they're internet savvy, then they could certainly vote, or they could have maybe one of their kids or grandkids help them vote. Right. So I think it's a nice addition to making voting as easy and as common as possible, and hopefully drive up our our participation rate.
Absolutely. So I see a bunch of people watching. Hit the like button. You have a share button right in front of you, like a thumbprint away, okay? So try to hit that, share this with others, because we want other people to kind of engage and participate and ask questions. And don't be scared to ask questions yourself, because that is what we're here for. So we'll say hi to a couple people. Pat Burrows, how you doing? Larry Valenga. Larry Valenga is going to actually be on tomorrow.
Yeah.
Ryan Jackson, he'll be on shortly. Yvonne, what's going on, my friend? So what is, you had your project of the animal shelter, which is a big one.
Yeah.
If you were to get on council, or even not get on council, what would be a project that you would see for yourself in the next 4 years of wanting to do or wanting to accomplish? Is there something else that you kind of are passionate about that you want to do?
Well, that's an interesting idea. Something I really haven't spent a lot of time thinking about because I've been totally focused on.
That's why they call it the hot seat.
Totally focused on being elected.
Yeah.
And that certainly is my desire is to participate in the community in that way if enough voters agree with me. There are projects out there, and certainly one of them I know is near and dear to your heart. And that's going to take a lot of effort. The sports complex.
Absolutely.
And it's going to take a lot of cooperation from senior levels of government and local industry and everybody. But that certainly is the one big project that's floating out there conceptually. I'm sure there are other things that I could bite into. But as I said, right now I'm just completely focused on running a good campaign, effective, strong message campaign, and go from there.
Awesome. Let's talk a little bit about what's kind of been in the paper. As you know, every time there's an election, people shoot out ideas, and it's in the paper, blah blah blah. But what I see a lot is about the rail line. And were you on council when the municipality purchased it? And what are your opinions on there? And could we ever have the Great Ontario Marathon Trail?
I knew you were going to get that last little piece in there.
Yes.
I was on council. Surprisingly, it was my very first meeting. That
was your first meeting?
Very first council meeting 12 years ago. So there was 6 of us that were brand new. That was our first meeting. In closed session, we discussed the project, the concern about the CSX decommissioning and tearing up that track. We had heard from a number of agribusinesses in North Kent that were relied on that track, at least from Dresden North, and they were quite concerned about losing the service. There were already utility. It was already a utility corridor. I know that Integris and the PUC was interested in maintaining that corridor if possible. Parks and Rec had certainly the idea that perhaps it could be a trail someday. And we knew that there was tremendous value in the gravel and the steel, and so we actually thought that it was something that we had to protect at the time. There was also some ideas floating around about possible investments. Those didn't materialize, but there were conversations about them. So the thing that we did not know is under the way that the Transportation Act works, you have to commit to purchasing something with no idea what the cost is going to be.
Right.
And they came in at what we thought was a grossly inflated value. This is a government agency, and kind of the rest is history. We've worked with CP. We've had agreements. We've had some interest over the years from possible short line operators. I think that it was done with a sincere desire to help the industry, particularly in North Kent.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes business decisions, whether or not you can argue that the municipality should have been involved in it, but we had, being the government, locally, we had a sort of first right of refusal after the other levels of government didn't have any interest in it. So, we were the ones that were kind of put in the hot seat, and we did it with a sincere desire to help, and it just didn't pan out, and there still is tremendous salvage value there. I hope we can recover most of our investment. I'm not going to say we'll recover all of it, because it's been 4 years since I've really sat down and looked at any of the numbers.
Right.
So, but it was a sincere desire to protect something, because once it's gone forever.
Right. Now, you will agree that there is a chance for the Great Ontario Marathon Trail.
Sure, there is.
Awesome.
There's always a chance.
Okay, so Pat Burrows, Art, what are your thoughts on affordable housing for seniors and others on lower income? It appears that there is a crisis in CK with very few rental units available, and that's actually true, Pat. I get calls as a real estate agent all the time, not to purchase a house, but for people to just find something to rent, and we're talking a lot of people from many different income levels that are still needing rental units all over Chatham-Kent, and I mean the calls are crazy.
Yeah. No, I agree. We're kind of caught in a bit of a good news story, in that we do have a lot of people who are wanting to relocate to Chatham-Kent, particularly from the Greater Toronto area. There are people retiring, and active seniors, and people moving home with their young children, or people moving home to take care of elderly parents. And so we are getting a lot of pressure on both the sales side as well as the rental side for accommodations, and in some respects the local community, the existing participants in the local community, the existing residents, are somewhat being priced out of their own market, and I suspect that if that trend continues aggressively over the next few years, then you're going to see a lot more new builds.
Yep.
And you're going to see probably some new builds on the apartment side of the world as well. So there is a particularly acute problem with seniors, I know, and low-income housing. The municipality maintains a pretty significant inventory now, but the waiting lists are long.
Years, 3 to 4 years now.
So we're going to have to see new investments made there, and it's going to have to be in partnership probably with the federal government particularly, but we're going to have to see some new partnerships and some new investments. And in the short term, it's going to be some short-term pain, I know that, and I don't think there is a quick and easy fix, Pat, and
pretty much has to come from a lot of private.
it has to come, and the market will drive that. And if we continue to see these market pressures, then it'll drive it. But it's not something that's going to settle out and be fixed in 6 months or a year.
Right. Okay, so Tina, Ben was only 12 at the time, the rail line. Oh, thanks, Tina, because I'm a little bit older than that. Hey, Gloria, how you doing? So, what else can we talk about here? What do you guys have any questions? If you do, let us know what your questions are. Tiny houses, that's part of a possible solution, but it's also difficult because you still have to service these lots that have a tiny house on them. So servicing the lots and getting the lots is almost double the price of the tiny house that might be going on that lot, which is a little odd.
Yeah.
I like tiny houses. I think they're cool. They're fun. I don't know the impact long term. I discussed it with Laura Van Veen, a fellow realtor, I think last week about it. But what are your thoughts on tiny houses? Because you can almost, in some areas, put a tiny house village, really.
Well, and that's... So you're going to make a trailer park of tiny homes.
Well, it would be a tiny home, not a trailer park. They got to have foundations.
A tiny
and stuff.
home park.
Yeah.
Hey, if it's a viable alternative, a viable solution, then by all means let's look into it. It will create probably some zoning and some servicing issues
Yep.
that we'll have to address. You know, but I see nothing particularly wrong with the idea. I am a little bit concerned that you know, where do you cite them, because you know, you're going to have some issues with some neighbors in some neighborhoods. If you start citing tiny homes in amongst larger residences, single-family residences, there'll be some concern about property value and those kinds of issues. And so I think it's got to be well thought out with a plan. But if it provides some of the relief for the problem we were just discussing, or you know, maybe it's you know, we used to consider a starter home,
Right.
and they were relatively small.
Yeah.
And at the time, you could get into a starter home for $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, and then up to about 90.
Yeah.
And those don't exist anymore. So to me, this is kind of the next generation starter home idea.
Yeah.
A little bit, but
Yeah. Now, can the municipality actually do an experiment with a piece of land to allow somebody that's willing to put up the cash and that to build a little tiny house development, like 5 or 10 in one spot, and see how that goes and see how that plays out before actually doing anything other than that? Is there any experimental possibilities?
I think anything's possible.
Yeah.
I really do. You know, it just takes, if you have that one entrepreneur that wants to take that on as an investment,
Yeah.
then I don't see why we wouldn't want to support that. If it helps us iron out what all the various bylaw requirements are, then that would be probably a good real world experiment as well.
Because one of the things, now I do like the tiny homes, it's just that what happens to the tiny homes in 5 years from now when people decide that they don't want to live in a closet, really? And what happens to those properties? Do other people move in?
But
or
how is that really
Yeah.
tremendously different than I jested about the trailer parks, but how is that really all that much different? Because we have a lot of trailer parks around Chatham, Kent. A couple quite large ones not far from Chatham, just on the north side, and another on the south side.
Yeah.
Those are permanent homes.
Yeah,
You know, people are living there 12 months of the
Yeah,
year.
when I look at like St. Clair Estates or whatever, those aren't just tiny homes. Those are actually large trailers. Those have a ton of space compared to some of the proposed 500, 400, even down to 300 square feet.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I mean, I appreciate that. But I mean, if they're well built and well maintained, you know, I don't know if there's a particular lifespan for a tiny home.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like any other dwelling. If you don't care for it, things will happen to it.
Okay, so let's use Field by Northside. There's a question here. Idea to bring industry to CK. Thoughts on multi-use sportsplex with ice pads. Great, Sean. I like how you threw that in there. Bringing industry to CK, and what industry would that be possibly? Do you have any ideas in regards to a direction or an area that we would bring in, whatever industry that would be?
Right. I actually think that we need to redouble our efforts on making Chatham, Kent as attractive and as user-friendly as we can for the existing businesses.
Okay.
Because I think the existing businesses, first ensuring that they stay here, but also allowing them to grow, and you know, they will drive most employment. New employment in a community over the next number of years. We really need to focus more of our economic development activity on retaining and assisting. We need to focus on young entrepreneurs, innovative spaces, those kinds of projects. You know, hopefully when we get the high-speed fiber laid down, that might be able to drive some more of that kind of innovative startup type activity, and not, you know, right across Chatham, Kent, and a lot of the smaller communities as well. We definitely need to refocus our foreign direct investment activity. It makes no sense for us to continue to go to places like China or India, Korea, I know that that was in style back 12 years ago when our current mayor was first elected, and every community, every municipality was doing that. Every level of government was doing it. I sense that that's pretty much, except for the most senior levels of government, that's pretty much pulled back right across municipalities. There was some small payoffs to those activities. Certainly nothing that I think people would point to and say, it made a dramatic difference to our community. But I think we need to focus more on attracting businesses in Ontario, perhaps in Quebec, certainly in the neighboring U.S. states. There's always the challenges on trade and tariffs and all of that that's complicating make a lot of background noise in people's business decisions right now. Taxes, energy policy. A lot of that, not all of it, but a lot of it is outside of our control as a municipality. Right. But we have to do what we can to make it as friendly and attractive as possible. The sectors, there's a lot of advanced manufacturing, small, medium-sized manufacturing plants. High tech is always a sector. Agri-food, we could be doing a lot more on the processing side than we are. So I think we need to continue to look at food processing, food distribution. Those are the kinds of areas. Tourism. We've got tremendous assets, both natural and built heritage assets that we need to take advantage of to bring people to Chatham-Kent. And that's the one thing that we've always said over the years, that the hardest part of Chatham-Kent or Chatham is getting people off the 401. You've got that ribbon of highway there that's one of the busiest highways in the world. And when you can get people off, I have discovered that in talking to them, that they're quite charmed by the community. Right. And quite often they'll come back. Sometimes they'll even move here. So I think that we've got to find more ways to introduce people to Chatham-Kent. South Kent certainly has a huge role to play in that because of our water assets on the south side there. So we need to do more for tourism. We need to pick a couple, 3 areas where we're going to get the best potential payoff. Right. Yeah, rather than chase everything. And certainly not chase everything that, some things just don't make sense for our community. Yeah.
Awesome. Let's see here. Marjorie, how you doing? Dwayne Weaver, hello. Okay, start homes would be great. So let's go to the sports complex idea. So actually, Dwayne Weaver has one. What do you consider your greatest or your biggest achievement while you were on council? Yeah.
My greatest achievement while I was on council, I prided myself on, walking what is often a bit of a fine line for councillors between focusing solely on the ward needs to the detriment sometimes of what's good for all of Chatham-Kent. When I was elected, I knew the voters of South Kent had elected me, but once you're around that table, you have to actively engage in the issues and the concerns of the entire municipality. And if you were there to really only care about your own constituents' needs, like within your ward, then you're probably not thinking as broadly about the community good as you probably should. There are certain things at the ward level that are kind of make or break issues. I mean, you have to be ready to fight for things. Right. You are one of 18 people around that table, but you have to be prepared to go to the wire for certain issues. But I think it was the ability to, apply common sense and sort of that overall picture. Right. To a lot of my decision making. I supported things that probably weren't particularly popular in my ward, and I without naming any names, I know what they are. Some of it's almost ancient history now, but it's still it's still projects that get brought up from time to time. But I like to think that I was a thoughtful, intelligent, you know, creative thinker, and I approached it that way. There were I could think of individual projects that were tremendous. My 4 years on council, the second term, I also served as budget chair.
Okay.
And that was a tremendous, it's a learning experience. There's no question about that. No matter how, I spent 23 years in the private sector, and I'd managed budgets and people and all of that. But it's still, it's still quite the learning curve when you're a single tier municipality that deals in every issue and every investment possible. But certainly, again, while I was budget chair, I certainly tried to keep any tax increases as low as possible. It's always a sort of a desire to be zero.
Yep.
But it's somewhat realistic when you just consider inflation alone. But one of the ways to address that, while I was a budget chair, I also brought in a sustainability review process, where every service that was provided by the municipality was routinely reviewed for its effectiveness and for its relevance. Are there things that we could stop doing and nobody's going to miss it?
Right.
But trying to manage the budget and bring in expenses as low as possible. I felt that was a tremendous achievement for those 4 years, and it was I was a little outside of my comfort zone at first, and that's what is the challenging piece that's exciting to me.
I'm outside of my comfort zone every time I do these.
Yeah.
One thing that you kind of touched on there is walking that fine line between your own ward and the municipality, and having to look in the best interest of everybody that you represent.
Right.
Which is true, you represent the entire municipality. When I see some marketing, and it comes around every election, I do see a lot of people on the outside of the Ward 6, Wards 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They sometimes put out an us versus them kind of platform, and I see it in the Wallaceburg area. I've seen it in the Ward 2 area, with the marketing saying, well, this is what we need to do, and it almost gives me the feeling that it's them versus Chatham in Ward 6. It seems that way. How difficult is it going to be for those people, if they do get in, right, to kind of represent the entire municipality?
Well, some people, I'm seeing that this election cycle. There are some people out there that are running more of a divisive, disruptive type campaign, and making promises that I think are ill-informed, simply because of what you're saying. You're one vote out of 18, and you've got to advocate for your ideas. You've got to lobby the rest of council. You've got to get 10 votes. And if you can't do that with your idea, then you're going to be tremendously frustrated. And I think for some of those candidates, if they're successful in getting elected, are going to find themselves in a very frustrating place in a hurry. As much as people would like to see their councillors snap their fingers and all of the community's problems would go away, or my particular problem would go away, as long as there are people that actually think that there's silver bullets out there like that. But municipal government is it's a collaborative process. It's 18 people in Chatham-Kent that have to work together. And as I've said many times, Chatham-Kent is stronger together. and but we can only be together if everybody feels like they're part of the group
Right.
and are moving forward at a comparable pace. There are some communities that have always sort of struggled with that because they still, are longing for the days when they had their little town council,
Right,
and,
right.
and they were responsible from one end of Main Street to the other end of Main Street, and that was all they needed to worry about. Now they have to worry about a municipality the size of Prince Edward Island with only 103, 104,000 people spread thinly across it. So, we've got kilometers, thousands and thousands of kilometers, like 7,000 kilometers of roads and 800 bridges, and so it's if you're only concerned about your own little piece of the pie,
Yeah.
you're going to be frustrated because there's only so much money for that little piece of the pie because there's so many other pieces.
Right. So we're going to be wrapping up here shortly here. So if you guys have questions, get them in. Dwayne, one more. Hey, Cheryl, how are you? Chris June. Chris is actually going to be on tonight at 7:30. So if I lived in your ward, why should I vote for you?
Sure. Well, I'll give you a handful of reasons, and I've already expressed some of them. Certainly, I think we do need to retool our economic development activities. And I'm not going to get into that because we've already discussed that. I would like to see us repair some of the strained relationships that we have with senior levels of government. They have been strained over the last many years. That's an area of expertise that I have, actually. And I'd like to see that, because without those kinds of relationships, we're not going to have the additional dollars for infrastructure or for projects such as the Twin Pad Arena project. We'll never see them occur. So we need to repair those relationships. We need to get our financial house in order. We need to continue to pay down debt, which was something that we have done over the last 12 years, is pay down a great deal of debt. We need to make sure that every dollar that we're spending with respect, because it's difficult for those, for our people to pay taxes at the level that they pay. Everything's going up, and we need to make sure that those expenditures are as responsible and as effective as possible. I have a tremendous background. I did have 8 years of experience on council. I believe that it's time for this municipality to move forward, to progress. I've had that experience. Also, the last 4 years doing the animal shelter campaign, it's given me a nice break so that I could step back and think about some of the issues that we are facing as Chatham-Kent, and perhaps some new approaches to some of those. So I've had that bit of a break. I believe I was a very effective counselor when I was there for the 8 years that I was there. I have 23 years experience in the private sector, 7 years experience in the not-for-profit sector, having been at the Children's Treatment Center Foundation and building that organization. I'm well-rounded. I think that I've got that ability to think clearly and with some common sense about the issues that we face. I'm accessible. People. I like people. I like being out with people.
And you're not scared to come on here and answer questions.
I never have been. I mean, it's marketing, media relations, politics, government affairs, fundraising. I mean, those are the types of things that I've done. Administration, management. Again, I think that I'm experienced, and I'm thoughtful, and I have always been a disciple of leadership development, and continue to hone my communication skills and my personal skills, and try to be the best person in Chatham-Kent that I can be. And and this community is important to me. My family's been here since 1860s. I grew up out in South Kent, and I've raised my own family here. I've got 5 children,
A lot of kids.
and three daughters and 2 boys. And so I want Chatham Kent to succeed. I want it to be a caring community. I want to see it be a progressive community. But we can't throw the baby out with the with the bathwater when it comes to killing ourselves on the financial side. So
Right.
we have to find that balance. Indecision and stagnation, will get us nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
We have to move forward, and we have to move forward together, and we need to make this community feel like it is truly together.
Awesome. That's exactly what Don Fuoco says here. We are better together. Tina's a big fan. Let's see here. We'll take one more question here. Any thoughts on changing the name to Kent from Chatham Kent?
No, I would leave that alone. I believe that ship has sailed. Just the cost of changing everything to reflect
Right.
a different name, I think, would be pretty prohibitive.
Mm-hmm.
And we've worked so hard to market Chatham Kent outside of Chatham Kent, not to mention within Chatham Kent, and to just walk away from that equity, that 20 years of creating an awareness of Chatham Kent. I think that maybe will make some people feel good. Maybe it'll make the person who asked the question feel good. But I think I don't see a reason for us doing it.
I see a lot of comments have come in. If you just rebrand it CK and leave out Chatham Kent, you almost have more of a one feeling for some people, and that could solve a problem right there by calling it CK more often. I don't know.
I always talk about Windsor, Essex. I
Yeah.
always talk about Sarnia, Lambton. Now they're not all single-tier municipalities, but St. Thomas Elgin. It's to me, it puts us on the map in a stronger sense
Mm-hmm.
that we are together. We're not. One thing that we're not doing, as much as people maybe didn't like the way amalgamation occurred, we greatly reduced the size of local government and the number of politicians involved in government. We're no longer financing multiple tiers of government. We're just
Right.
financing Chatham Kent,
Mm-hmm.
one tier. Now, granted, that's a larger enterprise, but we could have been. We could have been in the state of some nearby municipalities that still can't. Windsor and Essex historically have had a bit of a confrontational relationship
Yeah.
between the city and the county. We don't have that, or at least we don't have it if we don't perpetuate the belief
Right.
that we have it.
Yeah. Awesome. So that's going to wrap it up. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We had a good crowd for 1 o'clock in the afternoon watching.
Thanks, everybody.
If you guys are watching on the replay, still don't be scared to hit the comments, ask questions. Art will probably try to get back to you through text on there after.
Sure.
But don't be scared to hit the replay button. Don't be scared to hit the share button. I really greatly appreciate it. If you do hit that share button, hit the like button, and keep on supporting these. We have Karen Crooked White coming up at 4 o'clock today, and then Chris June later tonight at 7:30. So we're bringing you more candidates to talk about the issues and bring your questions in. So thanks, Art, for coming on again.
Thank you.
And hopefully we'll touch base again in a month or so.
This is a great thing you're doing, and it's one of the, I remember from previous campaigns that often heard that, how do I get to, how do I get to know, or how do I meet my
Right.
candidates, right? And there was, certainly there was town hall meetings and debates and those types of events, but what you're doing takes it right into their living rooms or right into the, their hip pocket on their smartphone
Yeah.
or whatever, right? So I think this is a tremendous initiative that you've got going here, and I wish you all the best with it. And I know I certainly look forward to watching what Karen and Chris and others have to say, Larry tomorrow. So, keep it up.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Art, and thanks all of you guys. Every like and share, we greatly appreciate it. And we will talk to you guys soon.